Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar from Fliplet called Enjoy Responsibly, Sustainably Scale Your Firm's Mobile Apps. Today, Mike and I will be going through a number of various topics that we've covered with a number of customers over the last few years with the idea of sharing our knowledge. So if you just go back to the previous slide, Mike, my name's Ian Broome. I'm the CEO of Fliplet, and my colleague who'll be presenting with me is Mike Gallup, the Commercial Director at Fliplet. Today, we're going to be covering a brief introduction to Fliplet for those of you who aren't familiar with our technology, in case you had hoped to come here and learn a bit about Fliplet and what it does. We won't be going into detail about what Fliplet is. We'll just be doing a really brief introduction. So don't worry if you're already a customer or you're already in talks with us. Hopefully that will be over quite quickly and I won't bore you too much. Then we're going to talk about how to control the risks associated with mobile apps. We're going to talk about how law firms deliver 5 mobile apps within 8 weeks through a program we call our Accelerator Program. We're going to talk about how to deliver internal and or client-facing innovation efficiently, what to use as success metrics when determining if your change management program, particularly in relation to mobile apps, is working effectively. And then right at the end, we're going to cover some top tips that you can apply when rolling out new technologies, kind of giving you a list of takeaways that you could take if you were hoping to action today's webinar inside your organization. We're going to save plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. We'll hopefully have about 15 minutes. So just briefly, I'm sure everybody knows how to use Zoom by now, but just in case, anybody can ask questions at any time during this webinar. Don't worry, Mike and I won't get distracted. All you need to do is just click the chat button inside Zoom and type any questions that you have. And my colleague Lisa will be jumping in when we get to Q&A, reading out any questions and putting them to Mike or myself. Please stay on mute. And please keep your camera off, and we are recording this so that we can share it with people who weren't able to attend today. So a quick overview of Fliplet. Fliplet is a prefab app builder. What does that mean? It means that you can very rapidly create apps, mobile and web apps, using Fliplet out of pre-built components. You can also optionally then customize it with code. Fliplet includes a broad set of capabilities. All you need to do is just drag and drop them into your app and configure them. They're brandable. Their settings you can manipulate the settings to get them to do pretty much whatever you want. And then, as I previously mentioned, you can also bring code in if you want to manipulate them even further and really highly customize them to suit your needs. Fliplet apps can be distributed to a number of different sources. So the most common one is public app stores, followed closely by enterprise or private internal app stores. We also support web, and our apps work on all major browsers, even Internet Explorer 11, which I know isn't really a major browser anymore, but we still support it. And if you need to, you can always extract the apps as files and sideload them onto devices, although not many people choose that option. Fliplet takes care of all the infrastructure for you. So we keep your app functioning, we update it, we make sure that it's meeting the latest security requirements. We ensure that operating system updates are managed. And of course, if there are any issues related with the platform or the standard features, we're here to fix them for you. So basically, all you need to focus on when using Fliplet is getting the app to do what you want and leave the rest to us. So let's move on now from explaining kind of what Fliplet is to how to control the risks associated with mobile apps. So first, what we thought we'd cover is actually what are the benefits of mobile apps, because I didn't want it to start on too pessimistic a note. So let's quickly run through the benefits of mobile apps, and then I promise you I'll talk about the risks. So the first thing that I think most people know from being a consumer is that people love mobile devices. Smartphones have exploded. They're everywhere. Organizations give them out to the majority of their new staff, and even staff that aren't given a corporate device still have a personal smartphone. And recent surveys suggest that on average, users spend 3 hours and 45 minutes a day using smartphone apps. And this is smartphone apps, specifically apps, not the web browser. And I thought that I'd differentiate that just in case anybody's thinking, but they're spending 3 hours and 45 minutes, mostly browsing the web. They're not. This is excluded. And the reason why people spend 3 hours and 45 minutes using smartphones, and again, I think most of us probably know this if we reflect on ourselves, but it's because smartphones are so easy to access. You just pick them up, they unlock almost automatically. You can access apps. Apps are very fast, and it's just a more pleasurable experience. Web apps on your mobile device, by comparison, are quite slow. Yesterday, my broadband had an outage, and I was reminded just how slow 4G is near my house. It was almost unbearable. Even using apps that interact with APIs, such as Slack or Teams, I was still noticing it took a long time to get messages. So it really does highlight that the speed of an app and the quality of a connection is critical to making a good experience. But ultimately, people spend a huge amount of time on their mobile devices doing more and more and more things. I don't know anybody who does banking on a computer anymore. Everybody does banking on smartphone apps. And I anticipate that as kind of the world progresses, more and more people will choose smartphone apps over computers. The other advantage, other than being very fast and easy to access, is also that apps are generally very simple. This makes them highly accessible and generally very convenient. Not only can you access the app you need, but also the app generally only does a few specific things. And it's really important to note, if you're thinking about producing apps in your organization, what are people really going to do on a smartphone? And focus in on that. Don't try to necessarily deliver, say, a legacy or a desktop application experience onto mobile. So accessibility and convenience is key. Of course, the other huge aspect is a lot of apps can also work offline. It depends, of course, what you're doing, what your app does. If your app has very little kind of third-party or internet dependency, then it's highly likely you can deliver a very robust app experience, which increases further the convenience and accessibility. The user experience is usually very good on mobile devices. It's very simple, it's very easy, often doesn't require a lot of training. One of the key advantages of mobile apps is the proliferation of notifications. I think that we're all pretty familiar now with a red dot on our app icons and our lock screens being kind of full of messages, which we generally prioritize reading those notifications over browsing the list of apps. Kind of suggesting is if your app or your software isn't sending notifications, then it's likely to be missed by end users. And then finally, you've got personalization. And personalization is more of a feature than kind of a default capability of mobile apps, but it's very common, again, because the apps are very simple. They are highly personalized, and also they're intelligent. They only deliver the capability and the knowledge and the information or data that the end user needs. So they're kind of some of the benefits of mobile apps. Now let's talk about the perceived risks of mobile apps. So very, very high level, there are 5 key risks that we've found most of our customers care deeply about. The first is security. The second is concern that they won't be able to deliver the value expectations that they are hoping for, or that the app won't end up delivering a lot of value, therefore it is low value. Cost, it's kind of a universal risk, particularly when you're deploying a new technology. Time, which kind of goes hand in hand with cost. And then finally, skills, which are required in order to effectively utilize mobile apps. So now let's talk about each of these and how we work with customers to mitigate them. So first, security. So the primary security concerns is that customers are unsure about how they can secure mobile devices and in turn mobile apps. So the most common form of security that we see customers deploying is MDM, or stands for mobile device management. This could sometimes be Mobile Iron or Microsoft Intune are 2 very popular MDM technologies. And these MDM technologies allow you to protect and secure the app. The other key aspect, of course, is training, ensuring that the people who are building mobile apps understand the security risks and understand how to prevent common security issues from affecting the app. kind of complementary to training is making sure that your apps are using appropriate security. A most common form of security that's deployed into Fliplet apps at the moment is single sign-on, which is usually integrated with Active Directory from the organization. That helps organizations couple that with MDM and training feel pretty confident that the apps that are being produced, people understand and are taking into consideration the security risks, that we're controlling the risk through MDM and single sign-on. Add on top of that, Fliplet's default encryption features, but also its custom bring your own key encryption features. This generally helps customers that have incredibly sensitive information inside their apps get comfortable with using mobile apps and Fliplet. And then finally, but not least, policies and of course the procedures that correlate to them to ensure that certain standards are being met anytime an app gets created or deployed. And all of these risks, I should mention, are managed and controlled by Fliplet's Accelerator program, which Mike's going to be talking about in more detail in a bit. Moving on to low value. So there's generally a concern that, like, if we do not have many mobile apps, does this mean that our users will not know how to extract value? Therefore, we shouldn't necessarily try to deploy mobile apps. What we should do is stick with what they already know, which is typically desktop apps or web apps. I guess the primary realization a lot of our customers have once they deploy apps is that, of course, what they're doing is they're tapping into this existing consumer behavior of using apps on their mobile phones. And so therefore, it generally removes the requirement for end user training because end users are comfortable using apps very effectively and efficiently. You don't have to go and teach them. The other big advantage is if your end users have been starved of being able to access the data they want at all times, or maybe they have to do additional tasks like email themselves key pieces of data so they have it on their mobile device when they need it, all of a sudden their behavior can very rapidly change because they now trust that the app will have the information they're looking for at all times. And then the other aspect, which I mentioned on the previous slide, is make sure that your app has a really narrow purpose. That way you aren't trying to kind of throw too many features, potentially confuse the end user or leave them in a state of being uncertain about what they should do with this app and how to extract value. Keeping your apps nice and narrow not only keeps the complexity of the mobile app low, but it also increases the likelihood that an end user will be able to use it for the purpose that you intended. The next item is cost. So one of the easiest ways to control cost when producing mobile apps is low-cost solutions such as Fliplet, but there are many other solutions on the market. And then the other big aspect is not putting all of the emphasis onto IT or software developers in order to produce apps, but instead involving non-technical or semi-technical people in your business and encouraging them to be a participant in the app creation process, which is only possible through the newer solutions that enable you to not have to be very technical in order to produce apps. Moving on to time. So time is always a big concern. What we generally advise is that a customer who has experience with Fliplet can generally deliver an app in 2 to 3 weeks. Now, obviously 2 to 3 weeks is a huge generalization. On one extreme, we have customers produce apps and deliver them in the same week. That's very common for very consistent apps, such as an event app, where you're really just swapping the content and relaunching a copy of it. And then you've got obviously apps that can take months and months and months to produce. That could be down to integrations, that could be down to stakeholder delays or delays with the materials needing to go into the app, or just additional risk analysis being required, such as penetration tests and things like this. But 2 to 3 weeks kind of comes out as about an average for Fliplet. One of the other key aspects that we know can take a huge amount of time and really slow down our customers is integrations. Fliplet offers very rapid integrations. A lot of cloud-based solutions are now a lot easier to integrate into existing organizations. So that's a key thing to look for as well. And then finally, reusable processes. So this means that you can learn how to secure apps, you can learn how to build apps, you can learn how to deploy apps, and then you can reuse those processes. So you're not reinventing the wheel over and over again, which is a dramatic efficiency gain and enables the timeframe such as 2 to 3 weeks to be achieved when deploying new apps. And then finally, skills. So this refers to the skills gap, maybe the lack of skills that your organization might have because you haven't been doing mobile apps kind of much yet. It's quite common when we speak to a customer that they've generally done one, maybe max two apps. They've typically built it using in-house software developers. It's generally been okay, but the maintenance is the bit that IT or the software development teams generally dislike. They don't like being beholden to Apple and Google to have to continuously update their apps every single year. That's not generally how they work. So this skills gap and the knowledge gap can be solved by using tools that are purpose-built, try to reduce the friction as much as possible. One of the key things that we've realized Fliplet has to do is be very proactive as a vendor, working with our customers to offer training and offer fast training so that we can enable people to get to the next stage of their project as quickly as possible. Fast training in Fliplet's world generally relates to kind of 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the scope of what the user is going to be doing. The other key aspect is utilizing pre-existing skills. So if somebody already has a business analysis set of skills or a basic set of IT skills, or maybe has been involved in some other projects, we can leverage those skills and bring them to the table in Fliplet, not only accelerating that person's ability to understand Fliplet, but also enabling the organization to utilize skills that maybe typically haven't been able to be used on mobile app projects before, but now can be used on mobile app projects. And then finally, of course, you want to make sure that you've got the option of using professional services or paid services, just in case you end up with a resource bottleneck and you need additional resources. So I would just keep in mind that whatever tool you're intending to use to deliver apps, whether that be something as complicated as Xcode or Android Studio, or something simple like Fliplet, make sure that the kind of you know where you can get professional services if you need them. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Mike, who's going to talk a little bit about how law firms deliver 5 mobile apps within 8 weeks with Fliplet.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Ian, and hello, everyone. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start off talking about what happened before firms had the ability to work with Fliplet and before we had an accelerator program. So we understood that firms wanted, and not just law firms, this was kind of across the whole kind of business industry, but firms wanted to be able to use mobile more effectively. There were lots of other industries racing ahead, producing mobile solutions, a lot of it in the consumer world, and then businesses and corporations started to tap into this, and we started to get increased demand. The firms that had produced and dipped their toe into producing applications, as Ian mentioned earlier on, they had just one application. In some cases, it was built internally by an individual person, sometimes using an agency as a way to kind of test, is this something that we want to do? Sometimes it was just that they'd used an endpoint solution, such as an event app from a supplier, and just added their content in. But really, there wasn't a big market for mobile apps within the legal industry. A lot of firms feared that they lacked the experience and all of the things that Ian had just really spoken about. We haven't got the skills, the experience. We don't want to invest in this because we're not sure if this is the way we want to go. There wasn't a lot of firms were used to things like WordPress, where you can drag and drop to build a website, but there wasn't an equivalent when we started out 12 years ago for the mobile app building industry. So they had to look at either agencies, which were expensive, or building something in-house. That led to a lot of concerns around security, mainly because they hadn't done it before. They wasn't sure. MDMs were relatively new. There was lots of kind of, do we want to put this information out there? So that was something that we had to factor in. And what it led to is the risk-reward ratio being out of kilter. Firms were very much not wanting to take the risk and invest in this, not when there were so many other priorities that they were working on. And bear in mind, this was basically all eyes were on the IT team. It was like, we need you to produce these, but they were the ones that had to control the risk and keep the lights on and update all of their other IT software. So it was pretty unfair on the IT teams. So we created the Accelerator program. So why did we do this? Well, we wanted to help firms to be able to scale up this use of mobile. This wasn't about being an agency producing solutions on demand as and when they were needed. We knew that firms needed to be able to have that expertise and understand the art of the possible. What is it that we can use this for? For a long time, firms have been building SharePoint pages. It was a safe environment for them to be able to give access to different people within the firm to be able to update that. Well, we wanted to share with them how they could do the same with mobile. It was about education as well. How can you, when is the right time to use a mobile application and when is it not the right time? As in, what we didn't want firms doing is trying to jump on the bandwagon of building applications and therefore just trying to find a problem to solve that actually maybe wasn't a problem in the first place. So we wanted to be able to show them when and how they assess when an application for mobile is the right solution. We also wanted to share examples. So we wanted to put in their hands prototypes of things that they could use and give them the knowledge so that they could customize it to suit their specific needs. Now, throughout this webinar, you will hear us refer to things like prototypes and templates, and people get a vision in their mind about something that's very rigid and structured. Let me assure you that everything that's built on Fliplet is 100% customizable. So whenever we say a template, it's merely there to accelerate you being able to put something together. It's about education. We didn't want IT to be the sole bearer of mobile applications. So how can we get people within the business to actually be part of that process of getting the applications that we need? The line of business people know the solutions that they need. They know their clients. Their clients know what they need and what they want. But the process prior was very much a case of taking a list of requirements, documenting it, getting a business analyst involved, then trying to pass that and explain that to either someone technical or to an agency. They had to then interpret that, and there was lots of backwards and forwards. What we've tried to do is to get that business unit to very rapidly put a prototype together and share it in a safe environment so that they can get feedback from pilot users, from clients, before that app actually goes live with real data in it. We wanted also to productize simply what we had seen from our most successful clients. So we started working with clients in 2014 within the legal industry. We've worked with over 60 law firms now. So we've been able to analyze over the years which firms have been more successful and got the greatest value from Fliplet and which ones haven't, and therefore what have they done? And all we've done in this accelerator program is really productized what it is that they did. So that's where we are able to share a lot of best practice with you guys. But in essence, it's deliver a new capability. We didn't want firms to be beholden to us. Every time you want a new mobile app, we don't want you having to get a new PO and pay us more money and come back to us to build the solution for you. That just turns us into an agency. What we're trying to do is to empower that firm to be as innovative as they can be, give them that new capability that allows them to scale applications. So how does it work? That's the key question. So our end goal is to deliver a skill set into your firm. Yeah, that is the end. At the end of this, it's an 8-week program, and we want you to have the confidence to be able to go and produce new, exciting, innovative solutions outside of what we were initially doing for you. But in order to do that, we will build between 3 and 5 applications. Now, these are used as not only a training, but these are applications that you can launch and get value from immediately from within your firm. We try to involve at least 3 business units. This means that, again, not just one single department is the team responsible for producing apps. We want as many people to be able to decentralize that process. However, we do ensure, and you'll see later on, who controls it. What a lot of firms get concerned around is, I don't want all of these different departments just producing apps and we end up with hundreds of applications out there that are very hard to manage. That isn't the case. And I'll come into that more a bit later on. We want to show you exactly how, during this 8-week program, that you can get your applications and integrations done, security and all of the risk mitigated throughout this process. That also is something that is repeatable. So every time that new opportunity comes up to test and prototype an idea to see whether it's the right solution, whether internally or with your clients, you know how to use the integrations and make sure and check the security as well. It's very much about giving you a scalable process. 8 weeks is only going to give you 3 to 5 applications, which in the majority of time, you haven't really settled or matured into what your mobile strategy is likely to be. But we want you to have the confidence to be able to scale that process that you've just been through with us so that you can cater for any future requirements that you may have. So as I mentioned, it's an 8-week program. And the first phase is very much, we agree with you, the applications that we're going to build, and we have a menu of applications with some that are recommended and some that are sometimes more custom, but we want you to get them applications quickly. So the first phase, normally the first half, around 4 weeks, we're building these applications. We're in the driving seat. You guys are giving us the direction and we're building the applications. At the halfway mark, we then swap seats. We put you in the driving seat. We show you exactly how we built the applications, how you can update them, how you add new features, components, how you deploy the applications and complete testing, as well as the ongoing training and the management of these applications, because it's unlikely that these apps are going to be static. It's going to need updates and improvements to keep your audience engaged. So I mentioned earlier on that it was about, we don't want hundreds of applications just being out there in the ether with each team responsible for their own. So we have, how do we keep that under control? So the stakeholders are key to this, and how do we do that? So every app that we produce has a documented plan that goes against it. On that plan, it covers points such as, why are you building this app? Who is the intended audience? What value are they actually going to get from it? How is it going to be deployed? And then it lists all of the features, the components, and the workflows that are included within that application, meaning that we can get sign-off from the key stakeholder to ensure that we are working together with you, and that it mitigates the risk of this app not being valuable. We have regular check-ins throughout, not just with the key people who may be using Fliplet to produce apps, but the people who are ending up taking responsibility for them, whether that be a client relationship manager or partner, or someone within the business, such as HR. Sign off at various stages. We don't want to go down a rabbit hole and find that we've just gone off on a tangent and produced something that is not right, and nor do you guys. So it's making sure that at each step we're getting the right people to sign off to ensure that we are on track. The last thing is user permissions. So we have multiple user permissions throughout. So in the majority of cases, it's IT who kind of own the Fliplet platform. However, they're rarely the people who use it. So they would allocate marketing to have access to Fliplet. The grad recruitment team, the KM team, the events team, all of these different departments have access, and they can produce solutions within Fliplet. But very few will be given the permission to be able to launch the app into a live environment. However, what they can do is launch it into a test environment so that they can get people involved as they need to and retain feedback. But it means that apps only go live once they've gone through whatever your internal process is, and we will share with you what a suggested process may look like. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that every app has been checked by security. We're not, it has the correct level of security for the content and the audience that are using the application. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of what this is and why we've designed it and the value of it. But let's look at a few examples, because I mentioned earlier that all we did was productize what other firms had done. So let's have a look at an example. So Bird & Bird was our first law firm. They were the first people to contact us and say, hey, we want to start to produce applications. Now, they actually had an app prior to joining Fliplet, but that was launched in 2013. But in 2014, they transitioned that app over to Fliplet. And over the next 7 years, you can see this is not all of their applications. Of course, we can't talk about every application that they've built, but these are applications that are either in the public app store, which you can see across the top there, that they're the icons from the app store, but also applications that they've publicly spoken about. So it just gives you an idea that this is a continuous strategy as opposed to a one-off building app to tick a box. When you're building applications, they will be updated. This is, again, just taken directly from the App Store. It's public knowledge, but you'll see that this first application from Bird & Bird was Cloud Law back in the 12th of June, 2013. During 2014, it was migrated over to Fliplet, and then they've made multiple updates over the years. A lot of these updates were done structurally and added additional capability as Fliplet evolved. but now the content is being updated on a regular basis, but that doesn't need to be logged with Apple as a new version. It is just the content being updated either via API or via manual updates as and when they're needed. Another example, Clifford Chance. Now, these are just their publicly available apps, but you can see here that for 5 years, Clifford Chance have been working with us. They started off with emergency management, and really they've stuck within that arena, offering advice and support around cyber assist and first responses. More recently, in 2020, they launched a new litigation guide, but have also started now to run hackathons, which again has been widely promoted, where their new graduates are given an insight into how Fliplet works, more so to get their mind in the right place of thinking about new solutions. When they're talking to clients, are there new solutions that we can be coming up with that would benefit them as a client? A couple of other recent accelerator programs, and I'm really pleased that I've got a couple of people on the webinar from these firms. So we've kept it very generic. We don't want to give anything away, but these firms have all joined in, I suppose, in the last year and recently completed their accelerator programs. And this just gives you a kind of a bit of an idea of the variety. You'll see that many firms have taken 5 years to get a certain number of applications. These firms have been able to rapidly get a number of apps just by completing the accelerator program. So Sol Ewan and Todd, welcome, hi. They've built applications to support the community or the culture of their firm. They've done learning and development. They've got some marketing resources. They produced a portal to house all of their applications and keep everything, I suppose, neat, tidy, and secure. And also our kind of runaway success, the return to office application that we launched just after the lockdown started. Dykema produced 3 applications around idea management, marketing, and project management. And we've got Gowlin as well, producing an internal workflow, a directory, and a know your customer solution. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a broad overview, and I would suggest if you have contacts, if you know the guys at these firms, feel free to reach out and get some feedback from them on what their thoughts are around the accelerator. The impact of this, just to really summarize, is that 3 to 5 apps will be delivered during that 8-week period. You will have a process that would enable you to scale the development of applications throughout your firm, not just in your IT department. You'll receive training and have a really in-depth understanding of how to deliver both internal and client-facing solutions in a secure environment, in the most efficient way and most cost-effective way possible. Because all of our clients that's on the accelerator program are on a plan called an unlimited app plan. It means that they can produce 1 app or they can produce 100. It does not increase the cost. Processes of how to understand the control and the risks associated, which is what Ian talked about right at the top of this webinar. So obviously a lot more detail goes into that through the accelerator program. So if you are thinking about taking on and starting to have more of a mobile strategy or a digital mobile first strategy in your firm, there are certain things that you want to be able to judge the success of that on. Now, this isn't the success of mobile apps. The mobile app success is something like, well, how many people are using it? How many people are engaging with an application? What I'm talking about is how do you judge the success of scaling mobile application production within your organization? So therefore, you should be looking at things like the speed of delivery. You may, if you take 9 months to produce an amazing app that, hits all the right notes, if you could have produced the same application in 1/3 of the time, obviously that's going to be a better success metric. So the speed of delivering apps, ensuring that the risk is managed, that the minimal amount of time is spent, because unfortunately, not every app works. Not every app is the best idea ever made. Sometimes clients just don't engage with it. Sometimes internally, people don't engage with it. That doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong or the technology has failed. It's just not been a success. So we don't want to spend too much time on something until it's been fully tested. How much can we use the components and all of the applications that we've built in the past to speed up future app development? A great example is that if you've built a return to office app and it includes a directory, if you wanted to reuse that directory within Fliplet, you can just pick it up, copy it, and put it into another app. You don't need to do lots of additional work or build something from scratch again. So the reuse of stuff that you've built in the past and branded, how easy is it to do that? Also, how many apps have been created outside of IT? This really is a great judge of have you decentralized this process. Also, a sustained period of time. Mobile isn't going anywhere. Mobile applications are just, the number is growing every single day. This isn't about ticking a box and getting an app to say that you've got one. This is about how we're using these for the right reason at the right times in the long term. And also the reduced ongoing involvement. So, IT may not be producing them, but when are they getting involved? How much time are they spending? If it's only 5% of the time IT are involved because they've had to check the security parameters, they've had to maybe confirm the integration is working, things like that, rather than actually building the whole login procedure or process within the app time and time again. So they're just a few of the metrics that you should be thinking about before you start to scale applications, and does whatever solution you're looking at offer positive results from these metrics. Ian, do you want to go through some top tips?
Yeah, sure. So I guess before I dive into the top tips, I thought I'd just remind everybody, if you do have any questions, Mike's been talking about terms or scenarios that you're not familiar with, you want us to go back and revisit a slide, go into more detail about something, etc., just post your question into the chat. We'll be getting to those within kind of 10 minutes, I imagine. So I'm going to go through some top tips that you can apply when rolling out new technologies rapidly. It's worth pointing out that these are based on our experience, helping customers to rapidly deploy kind of our technology. But I believe a lot of the tips that I'm about to go through are fairly universal. And hopefully, if you're currently meeting with vendors, considering implementing any new technology, some of what I'm about to say will be relevant to you. So first top tip is stakeholder involvement and agreement. We mentioned that this is something that we've definitely learned, that you have to actively involve your stakeholders. You have to have a sign-off process. We've actually implemented a sign-off process just by building an online form. We just ask people to fill it in. So we try to remove as much friction as possible from the sign-off process. And we also make it very clear at the beginning, before we start working with any stakeholders, these are the expectations we have of you. These are the different stages I'd like you to sign off. So again, if you've had a lot of experience deploying projects, that might be kind of common knowledge, but it's always nice to be reminded. It also helps to remove a lot of risk with stakeholders popping up at the 11th hour saying, but hang on, I didn't understand that that's what I was doing. A formal sign-off process prevents a lot of that, those last minute changes. Clear metrics. So one of the things that Mike mentioned is a big focus for us in the Accelerator program is defining app plans for each app with very clear metrics. And one of the things that we found with metrics is they can't always be whole figures. Sometimes they should actually be percentages. So for example, let's say that you're deploying a solution to staff like return to office. Well, if you had have said, I want 100% of people to use the return to office app, but only 5% of people are currently actually going back to the office, then you're highly unlikely to achieve your objective. Whereas if you say something like 100% of people who are returning to the office will use the return to office app, then obviously you can feel happy knowing, good, it's much more likely we will achieve close to 100% of people returning to the office are users of our return to office app. So clear metrics, specific metrics, and being kind of mindful when to not use whole numbers but percentages is a really valuable lesson that we've had over the years. Use technologies that do not depend on large amounts of IT resources. IT is constantly squeezed. I think a lot of departments just go directly to IT whenever they come up with a new idea. IT can quickly feel like they're the bad guys for saying no. One of the things that IT can do to kind of make other parts of the business kind of realize the pressure that IT is under is empower them to do the project as much as possible. The other thing that we've also started to see a number of our customers do is to kind of build almost a center of excellence around particular technologies. So for example, it could be legal technology gets its own separate team away from core IT. This enables the legal technology team to respond directly to new technology requests from practices or customers and not distract IT from like keeping the lights on, keeping servers running, keeping email functioning, etc. So I think any technology that you can bring in where you're able to kind of move it out of core IT or possibly move it out of IT in general, but IT needs to not lose control. And we've mentioned that as well. And we're definitely not advocating. So use technologies that offer IT control, but can be decentralized. So that's the point that I just made. Involve line of business resources early. So again, this is about setting expectations. So when somebody in line of business, a practice, or another department approaches you and says, hey, I've got this great idea, I want to do this, it's like, amazing. How are you intending to be involved? Because if you just want to tell me to do the project, then get in line. Whereas if you're going to bring resources and all I need to do is support and coach you, or even better, maybe there's a vendor like Fliplet or somebody else you're working with where you can directly introduce the resources to the vendor and ask the vendor to be responsible for supporting the project. As the next point says as well, you can also kind of ensure as part of your negotiation with vendors that they will be responsible for training and ensuring that non-IT resources are effective. Next point. So ensure the vendor is contracted to achieve key objectives with fixed price agreement. So I think this is about alignment. It's very difficult, and we still hear horror stories from customers that work with vendors who the vendors try to charge them more retrospectively, and the vendor hasn't yet delivered the successful project. To us, being a kind of a relatively young business and obviously kind of rapidly growing, this seems like the old way of doing things. Like the new way of doing things is to offer as much value proactively as possible and bring mature processes to the table that enable a fixed price agreement, and a clear sign-up process and clear metrics that you're working towards, not just letting kind of stakeholders change and drive where the project goes and then retrospectively charging them. So this is a really key point. Make sure that the vendor educate the broader company to avoid solution duplication. So what this refers to is what we've noticed is that it's common for clients that we work with to then take it upon themselves to become like a inner sales rep or an inner networking person for our organization. And I think that's wrong. The reason why most of the time clients bring a vendor into the business is to save them time, not create more work for them. So one of the things that we've started to do, and it kind of relates to our experience with the Accelerator program, is ask introductions to a minimum of 3 different business units or departments, and then we'll manage the relationship with them. Now, that definitely puts more pressure on us. We're managing more contact points in a client organization than maybe a standard vendor. But the advantage is that a customer doesn't have a single point of contact with us, which is a nice risk management, in case somebody was to get COVID and be out of the business for 1 or 2 weeks. It also encourages the vendor to be proactive in engaging with different parts of the business and drive the change that the client originally purchased the vendor for. So in the case of Fliplet, if you buy us to help us produce mobile apps, and you connect us to different parts of the business, you expect that we are going to become the voice of change, and obviously report back to any kind of key stakeholders who own the relationship with Fliplet about our success working with other parts of the organization. Ensure you have a clear plan for ongoing maintenance, reporting, and support. I think this kind of goes without saying, but again, it can sometimes be overlooked when you're so focused on we have to get the solution in place, we have to get it embedded. What you can then miss, as we saw in the Bird and Bird example, is actually you're probably going to have this app for kind of 6 or 7 years. So actually, just getting the app out the door can feel like a marathon running up a hill. But once you actually hit the top of the hill, what you'll see is kind of a lot more hills kind of in the future that you're going to have to overcome as well. So it's really therefore important that there's a clear plan for who's going to do the ongoing maintenance, what's the ongoing reporting, and how the support going to work. And again, all of these aspects we've learned to include in our app plan. And then finally, integration should be done up front and tested early to create processes. We learned pretty early on that most of our customers really just want to integrate with SQL Server. That's where they're storing data, or that's where they're able to extract data from other sources and store it successfully. So therefore, in order to support those integrations, we created a very simple, takes about 30 to 60 minutes to install. We call it our data integration service. But I'm just using that as an example of how we learned that in order to help our customers, we need to A, front load the integrations, not leave integrations to the end. And then B, we need to make sure that when a customer is doing those integrations, they're really successful really fast. Because if they are, then they're probably going to be more open to doing future integrations. And if they have a bad experience, then they're going to be less open. And obviously integrations are critical. Apps are not an island. They're generally not very effective if you keep them isolated. They have to integrate with other services. Of course, more and more cloud software nowadays also integrations are critical. So definitely, I would probably be so bold as to say, hold your vendors accountable for getting integrations done in a set period of time. And hold them accountable to any promises they make about how fast or easy integrations are, so that you're not left kind of still struggling with an integration where everything else is ready to go. So there are our top tips for rapid implementation of technologies generally. Hopefully a lot of these are applicable. Hopefully I haven't told you too many things you didn't know already, but I've reminded you of some exciting kind of topics that you can use in kind of discussions or possibly with vendors you're currently onboarding. So let's move on to Q&A. So Lisa, have there been any questions asked that you would like Mike or I to answer?
Yes, we've had some great questions come through to me directly. So thank you very much, everyone, for those. The first question is, what are the most common types of apps that are built during the Accelerator program? And then what are the types that you would recommend that we create first?
Mike.
Okay, so over the past 12 months, the most popular is by far the return to office solution, or the remote and office management solution. So that one's been extremely popular, and it has some really powerful features in it. So we highly recommend that one if it's right for you. Directories are such a simple solution, but actually one of the most valuable that you can have. So if you don't need a return to office solution, but you don't have a mobile accessible directory, we highly suggest you have one of them. Event apps are always popular, or at least they were when events were happening. But as the world returns to normal and we start to have either in-person events or virtual events or a hybrid mix of events, we have solutions to cater for every single one of those scenarios. So we again encourage people to be able to use the event app solution, not just for your big partner retreat type events, but when people are happy to venture out again and you're running events on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, why not have a solution that it's one solution but caters for all of them events? It will give you so much more data when you start really using it, and a much better experience for your customers. I think marketing, there's been so much in the news recently about firms producing technology solutions for clients, whether that be huge AI projects, whether it be data visualization using maps. This is a growing trend, and we have a template available. We called it the marketing app template. However, this solution has so many different aspects to it, from maps to comparisons to quizzes and questionnaires. It can be used across so many different parts of the organization. We highly recommend that you get something client facing, whether it just be a reference guide or whether it be something much more lead generation, much more interactive. We would suggest that you go along that route as well, because we really see the direction of travel to be in these kind of client facing tools. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the most common applications being built on our recommendations.
Thanks. And someone else has asked, what happens if we only have 1 or 2 key app ideas rather than 3 to 5 apps?
Yeah, great question. Of course, we will support you with your 1 or 2, but as part of what we're trying to do, we're trying to give you guys the confidence to know where you can take this in the future. So you may only have 1 or 2 now, but it's likely that once you understand the art of the possible and where the real value is with mobile, you're going to have other solutions. So we want to ensure that you've had the best training possible. So what we would do is we would look at the 1 or 2 apps that you're currently interested in. We would look at the features, the functionality, the audience, to decide, okay, are there any gaps? Are there any features that we see that are commonly used by our other customers? And then we would recommend at least one additional application that we can build on your behalf to show you capability and to show you how to use it. So for example, things like live polling. You may decide that you're going to build internal applications, but none of them include a live polling feature. Well, we would then suggest to say, hey, look, our event app includes live polling. Why don't we build this out for you? You may not have any content or any need for it today, but you may well do in the future. But I'd like to show you how that feature works in case you want to reuse it in the future. So we would help you and again, advise on what additional solutions we would like to prepare on your behalf, train you on, and put into your account, ready for use at a later date.
Cool, thank you. So there's a couple of questions about around the stakeholder management topic. So if we're building 3 to 5 apps with different areas of our business and therefore have numerous stakeholders, do you assist in managing the project?
The whole Accelerator program is managed by us. So if you have each application is its own project in its own right. So if we had, again, let's just stick with the events team, you would have a key stakeholder for the event app, and we would manage that as one project. And then there may be another 2 to 4 projects running exactly like that. So they sign off at every stage, and each app is a single project.
And how rigid is the stakeholder management tips that you've given? You know, if the question is, if my colleagues are unable to join calls every week, how will that impact the Accelerator program?
So at the end of the day, we have a level of value that we ensure we deliver. Now, of course, there are things that happen. The 8-week program is a long period of time, especially in the legal industry. Anything could happen. So we are as flexible as we can be. And sometimes we do have to do some back-to-back meetings. Sometimes we do have to rearrange calls due to illness or holidays or whatever. So we try to be as flexible as we can. We have in the past had to pause an accelerator for 2 weeks because of an emergency and then restart it again. But of course, you guys want to have an end date. You want to be able to move on and continue with other projects. So you have to be able to have confidence in us that we can deliver within the timeframes. But again, it's not set in stone. We will be as flexible as we need to be to help you within reason.
I think the other thing to add is also that I've been involved with a couple of projects recently where we've scaled down the scope based on information that we've received once the Accelerator program has started. So the advantage of something like Fliplet is it can react. So I've had 2 examples of this. One, a client found they thought it would be very easy to extract information from an existing system. They found out it was very hard and that the upstream system was quite buggy, and therefore that created some problems. So we've scaled down the project to enable them to provide us with a sample of the data, which they were able to just manually extract, so we can keep the project going, and we'll kind of make sure that the upstream system is noted as a risk, and of course the client's working on it now to try to figure out how do I get the data out of this system without jeopardizing the project further. The other example is we had a client come to us with a very simple set of content that was publicly available, and we were able to extract it really easily, but it wasn't very compelling. And so after conversations with the client, we realized that we could probably add 2 or 3 additional features to this app, not really putting any additional stress on any of the stakeholders involved in the project, but deliver a much better end user solution to customers by adding these additional features. So I think although we would prefer the project ran as smoothly as possible, real life happens, as Mike said, and being flexible during the Accelerator program, just like through any other project that you're running, is an important aspect.
Okay, great, thank you. And there's just 2 more. You mentioned integrations quite a fair bit. Do you have any examples of integrations that clients have done with Fliplet?
Yeah, I think the most common one was the one I referred to, is integrating with SQL Server. And if the question is more related to, well, why would they integrate something as opposed to what would they integrate with, one of the most common reasons relates to what Mike said with return to office or the remote and office management service. So one of the key things that app does is provide a directory of everybody, their current working status, whether they're working from home, whether they're working in the office, and enables them to then book spaces in the office. In order to populate the app with a list of users, often Fliplet is integrated via the data integration service with a database, usually SQL Server, and the list of staff is then populated in Fliplet, and in turn in the Fliplet app, so that people are able to see their colleagues without their colleagues having to set themselves up proactively. So that's one example. Another example is syncing over organization news, such as internal news or company news, to create a news feed for an app. There's also lots of other examples, but some of the other examples relate to information that is put into a Fliplet app getting uploaded from Fliplet into an on-premise database or into on-premise files, so that it can then be dealt with via internal workflows. So we have examples of integrations kind of going both ways.
I think as well, just to add to that, there's been lots of conversations, and there's firms now looking at integrations with tools such as HiQ. So whether that be Fliplet being integrated and added to the HiQ platform to give additional functionality to their existing portals, or vice versa, how can we take data out of HiQ and expose that onto a Fliplet app? So these are definitely things that, additional integrations that firms are doing.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning Dan Pryor at engineer.legal, who's kind of spearheading that with quite a few of our customers at the moment, mainly because he's ex-HiQ. So he kind of understands how the systems work, and he's also a big fan of Fliplet.
Thank you. And the last question is, can existing clients take advantage of the Accelerator program?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Accelerator program has only been around, I think, for around 18 months, 2 years. So any of our existing customers that have been with us, but maybe needs that reinvigoration of understanding what they can do and how they can scale it even better, we do offer that solution to anyone that wants it. And you can have it multiple times if you need it. So yes, just contact us or your account manager if you're an existing customer.
Cool. And I've just received a message directly from somebody who is just asking, basically, what's the level of support that Fliplet offers to new customers? What's the level of existing knowledge that they need to have in order to be able to effectively use the Accelerator program? So the good news is not much. Fliplet is very used to working very closely with our customers to kind of help them understand all of the technical aspects of Fliplet and apps in general. Apps are quite complicated, not helped by Apple and Google's kind of App Store submission process. So it's very common that we work very closely with our customers to ensure that their first few apps are successfully integrated, configured, tested, and launched. Often what we find, though, is customers, as soon as they see how easy it is, and this isn't me kind of taking liberties, literally, I would say at least 50% of our customers have already started building new apps on Fliplet before the Accelerator program ends, because they realize this is so easy. Like, I have no concerns anymore. So yeah, I'll make sure that the person who asked this question kind of gets handed over to Mike, and you can follow up with them.
Sure. So just to finish off, we do regular webinars, as some of you may know, but we're holding a special roundtable event. These are in response to clients asking us to have these roundtable events. We did them in 2019 prior to lockdown in Washington, in New York, in Cleveland. We can't do the in-person events, so we're doing a roundtable event next Tuesday. We have the IT director from Millbank, and we have the marketing director from Loeb & Loeb, who will be talking in detail around their experience with mobile, the solutions that they've been building. This isn't Fliplet talking. This is really about our clients talking about their their solutions and their strategy around mobile. And we do have a couple of seats left. It is a very restricted event because we're expecting everyone to turn up to the roundtable to actually take part and be involved. But if this is something that you think would be of interest to you, then please contact sales@fliplet.com or your account manager if you have one, and we will try and fill the last remaining few slots for that next Tuesday. But on that, thank you ever so much to everyone that has joined us today, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon and evening, everybody.